like to welcome everybody to Harness Your Data with Custom AI Solutions featuring Bitgrit. By way of introduction, Bitgrit is an Alchemist-backed startup that empowers companies to license ready-to-use AI models and crowdsource custom AI solutions from its global community of over 35,000 AI developers. With patented technology that enables AI model training without exposing private data, Bitgrit has worked on projects with leading organizations such as NASA, SoftBank, and Atray. Joining us today is Saksham Kukreja, COO of Bitgrit, who will be speaking on harnessing data securely with custom AI solutions. And Saksham is a seasoned entrepreneur, young but very accomplished, having founded and scaled and successfully exited companies like Global Cart, Pecipe, and Hashport. And with a strong research background in AI and Web3, he has published his papers in collaboration with the University of Tokyo and Hong Kong University. He is now based in San Francisco and is driving the Bitgrit expansion into the United States market after success in Japan and the Middle East. So without further ado, very excited to turn it over to you. Saksham, take it away.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for the introduction. And thank you guys for joining. And I'm very excited to be able to kind of share what you can possibly do to drive insights and value out of the data that you've been collecting. I am Saksham Kukreja, and I'm the COO of Bitgrit. So we're a company that originally started off in Japan, and then we kind of expanded to the Middle East. And now, because we have the backing of Alchemist, we are expanding over in San Francisco as well. Happy to connect with you all. And today we're going to be talking about how we can actually harness data securely while building custom AI solutions. So we all know that the AI field is exploding, and every single business right now is running towards having some sort of implementation of AI models within their organization. But before we kind of talk about custom AI solutions, it's very important to understand what these custom AI solutions are. So in all the hype, right now people are kind of confusing AI agents with all of AI, and ChatGPT is sort of at the center of it. So one of the first things that I'd probably want to talk about is how ChatGPT is not the same as all of AI solutions out there. So if I were to kind of break it down, we start off with artificial intelligence. A subcategory of artificial intelligence is narrow AI, within which we have machine learning, within which we have deep learning, and then we have generative AI, large language models, pre-trained transformers, and the core ChatGPT sort of lies there. Now, of course, it has integrated with a lot of different, AI models in itself. But let's take a moment to review what the graph of AI looks like. So when you talk about AI, there are a lot of different possibilities in terms of what it can do. And what you see on the screen is actually probably less than 10% of all AI models and all AI capabilities that exist out there. And if even if you were to kind of bifurcate all of these into subcategories, ChatGPT or all the large language models kind of come under a very small umbrella. So the potential of what you can actually do with AI models for them to better suit your business needs is practically beyond imagination. Uh, in order to understand how things are working out, imagine that you have a case where you want to use ultrasonic data in order to predict where there's a maximum probability of, let's say, finding an oil field, or you want to see satellite data to kind of understand how the weather is changing over time and what its implications are on climate change. Now, for all these you know very specific problem statements, you cannot expect ChatGPT to kind of come up with an answer, even if you have certain data points that can predict towards an outcome, right? So when we think of these use cases, when we think of the problem statements, and when we think of insights that can practically have a positive impact on your organizations, custom AI solutions are a big part of it. And let me kind of start by giving you an example of one of our, most well-known customers, that is NASA. So we worked with NASA on 4 or 5 different projects, and every single one of them was in partnership with a different US federal agency. And one of the projects that kind of gives me the most sense of pride and accomplishment that we were able to sort of contribute towards its development in some way and form was the biomedical research translator. Now, this particular model was developed along with NASA and the NIH, which is the US Federal Healthcare Agency, and it kind of took the research abstracts for all medical research that's happened in history to kind of come up with recommendations for diseases that are very rare, kind of come up with treatments that are cost efficient, that basically rely on drugs that are easily accessible and would react better for patients that are actually suffering from rare medical diseases. And that kind of factored in not just the research work that's existed, but also the fact that what the patient's medical records were like. So this is something really important, and this was kind of covered over by leading medical papers and news sites about how they have actually saved the lives of people with rare medical diseases. So one particular case that was very, very touching in a way was an 8-year-old girl in Birmingham, in Alabama, who was suffering from something known as Shine syndrome. Now, this is a rare medical disorder, and there are probably less than 150 diagnosed cases till date. And when this biomedical data translator was enacted on by the NIH, they came up with very simple day-to-day drugs that were able to kind of help her recover and cope up with the symptoms that she was facing. So you can imagine that this is just one of the use cases that kind of exist when you have very specific custom AI solutions built for the problem statements that you seek to solve. Another very interesting example that we had, and that kind of is something that I feel is the need of the hour today, was a climate change prediction model. Now, this particular model was basically, initiated by a UAE and Japan cooperation, and it was announced at COP28 in UAE, which is one of the biggest, conferences on climate change as a whole and environmental action as a whole. And it kind of utilized data from the satellites of JAXA, which is the Japanese space agency. So it focused on the MENA region, but it was able to kind of predict the impact of various, activities and how that is actually contributing to climate change, and ultimately help the organizations, the biggest user being ADNOC, to kind of take that in and ultimately take actions on making sure that they have limited impact on the environment despite their business activities. And one final use case that I wanted to kind of probably bring to light, and just to kind of show you the sort of diversity that exists when we talk about custom AI solutions, is when SoftBank actually created a model that took in inputs like financial data, but they kind of augmented that with news data and with sentiments on social media platforms to come up with a model that gave them a 98% accuracy on predicting USD versus JPY rates. And that way they could actually hedge their risks when it came to foreign investments and foreign trade relations. So again, for every single company, there's a use case that can fundamentally change the way that your business is operating, the way that you're competitive in the market. And it's important to realize what that is and sort of come up with an idea of what parameters, what insights can actually give you very definitive edge when you're competing with other players out there in the market. So but even if you have a lot of clarity in terms of the insights that you need, as is the case with a lot of large organizations, you need to understand that enterprise AI has a couple of complications. When you're deploying AI, when you're creating AI to be used at scale, just to kind of highlight a metric, 9 out of 10 leading businesses, the Fortune 2000 companies, are investing in AI solutions. They're ready with a problem statement. They're ready to understand what kind of insights they want to take out of the data that they've been collecting. And they are putting in a lot of money into it. But less than 15% of the projects that they invest in and that they work on actually make it to business operations. Now, this is a staggering number, but we have to understand why, right? Because at the end of the day, enterprise AI is not easy. So, if I were to kind of break that down into a very, very simple, simple components, the building blocks of AI, I'd say there are three things. One, there's data, the data that you've been collecting. This can be public data. This can be the private data that you've been collecting in-house. This can be in partnership with an external agency, certain governmental data. It can be any sort of a data point that can actually lead to actionable intelligence. The second thing is talent. People that are building these AI models for you, people that are able to kind of maintain the data pipeline, maintain the infrastructure that goes around uh, the successful deployment of an AI. And third is compute, right? And compute kind of takes in various forms. It can be on the cloud, it can be on premises, it can be, something that has to be customized, and models that need to have custom implementations so that they are better able to serve the needs of the organization. But if we, focus in on every single component, there's a big problem associated. And that's where the bottleneck lies, right? The biggest problem is actually data, right? A lot of people are collecting data, but access to this data is very difficult over privacy and confidentiality concerns. So imagine, let's say there's a big company like Visa that is collecting a lot of data on the transactions that can help you recognize, financial behavior of communities, of countries, of, just to predict the sort of amount of transactions that they are having. This is very, very actionable data. But the problem in this case is it falls under a lot of compliances, right? It falls under GDPR in Europe, CCPA in California. It also has an angle of confidentiality. You do not want your data to be exposed out. So companies that are collecting private sensitive data, they have to think about sharing it probably, 100 times, even when it comes to their internal teams, let alone sharing it outside of their organization. So just these bottlenecks in terms of privacy and confidentiality create a big bias in terms of how data can be accessed by people, by AI talent that wishes to leverage that and build their models upon it. When you talk about talent, there's a huge talent shortage. So as of now, it's estimated that out of, the 1.5 million AI engineers that are needed in the market, and this number is going to keep increasing every single day, less than 20% of that demand is currently met, right? And how do we go about, solving this issue? Wherein, you have to think about whether you are hiring the right people to actually build your AI models, go about being competitive in terms of their compensation, and that just adds up to the cost that is involved in creating a model that best fits your organization's needs. And finally, we talk about compute. And compute in itself is something wherein you have to consider that sometimes deploying that AI model and making sure that it operates at scale at the speed that you want it to at very less cost of computation, it's sometimes more difficult than creating the AI model itself. There can be a classic example of this is probably the large language models that you see out there. There's a big initiation cost. The amount of money and the amount of time that kind of goes into training these large language models before they can get out there and successfully commercialize, that was a big barrier for, these companies to jump. But now that we have it there, it is having a lot of returns for them. So for a lot of companies that are smaller that do not have AI as their core business, this compute actually becomes a centerpiece of the problem in itself when you kind of think about whether it makes sense for you to go about deploying the solution at an enterprise level. So this is also creating a bigger problem, which is most of the large tech companies that are out there, they kind of have monopolized these three resources, right? They have their own clouds, so they have, an infinite potential of scaling their compute resources. They're already collecting data because they have been in the IT field. They have a lot of data about, different people, about different businesses, about how they are interacting with each other in the digital environment. And this sort of data is kind of giving them another edge in the market. And finally, they have the talent, right? So if you kind of look at the statistics on the screen, it's estimated that they're kind of controlling over 75% of the global cloud market. They account for more than 50% of the investments in the global AI research and development scene. And they own over 30% of the AI related patents. And because of the prestige that kind of comes with it, a lot of people actually prefer, a lot of the skilled talent actually prefer to work with these established organizations. And this just makes it difficult, more and more difficult for smaller businesses to compete with these big tech companies. And ultimately, that leads to, barriers when it comes to competition. It leads to resource inequality, and ultimately, it kind of stifles innovation at a very grassroots level. So there's a very strong need to kind of make this open, to kind of democratize access of AI when it comes to all these three resources to the smaller companies, to the wider world. And if you talk about it from the perspective of an AI developer, they're also not at fault. Um, Even with this demand explosion, there are very few ways in which they can go about actually monetizing their skills, right? The way that they can currently be compensated is either if they take up a job at a leading company that pays them well, or they'll basically go about creating, custom solutions as maybe a project as a contractor. And in that case too, they lose ownership of the models that they create. So even if there's a wide success of the models that they have had a major hand in development, they'd probably not be on the side when it comes to the benefits of leveraging it. And then there are a couple of them that kind of take an entrepreneurial route and start their own companies, but you cannot cater to a very wide audience because the core of narrow AI solutions, the core of custom AI solutions, basically lies in your ability to fine tune these models, fine tune the research, the hypothesis on which you're building it to the needs of the organizations that you need to serve. For companies, what it does, it just creates challenges in terms of hiring talent. And for companies that are not very, very involved in terms of the technology ecosystem, they basically have, issues and even identifying who to hire in terms of understanding what quality AI talent looks like. And this makes the investment go up, and this makes it difficult for you to kind of come up with an approach to best understand how to go about building your custom AI solution. So now we kind of come to a sort of a section on what are the current ways in the market that are there to develop these custom AI solutions. If you were to go about and understand what kind of problem statement you wish to work on, what kind of insights that you can generate from the data that you've been collecting, or a use case that can be fundamental towards driving a digital transformation change within your company, how do you get started? So there are a lot of different ways, right? The first way is you just outsource it to an AI development company. Now, if you do that in the US, you know the costs of having these consultants, right? It is going to significantly add to your burden. But a lot of you might say, okay, I can outsource it to a team in, let's say, India, in Pakistan, in Thailand, where the resources are not that expensive. And hopefully, I can probably get a solution that's similar to what you'd have in, let's say, the Western markets. But if you have been discussing with people that have tried doing that in the past, most of them will tell you that was a bad decision because you have no control in terms of what is the quality of solutions that you're getting. You have a big dependency on this company that you have outsourced your work to, whether they'd be able to kind of deliver according to the expectations that you have. And ultimately, if they're not able to, you are stuck because you spent the last 6 months, working and contributing towards a project that's actually giving no results at all. And you end up in that pile of 85% of the solutions that actually never made it to the business operations. The second bet, which is probably a kind of a safer bet for a lot of companies that want to go ahead full throttle into using AI, is actually hire an in-house AI development team. Even this is a very expensive solution because you have to go about, hiring these people. There's a life cycle that's involved to it. There's a lot of time that you have to put in order to identify the talented resources and making sure that they commit to your organization. And sometimes you might not need an entire AI team. You might just need certain solutions that work out best for you. And one of the other issues that kind of comes with having an in-house AI team or having a sort of a contractor that kind of works with you is they are going to work on one approach. So they're going to hypothesize on what sort of model might work best for the use case that you have described. But ultimately, they're going to work on one hypothesis and they're just going to work towards improving it by the end of the project. So you do not get a lot of options. You're stuck with one particular approach and you are not exposed to the kind of accuracy and to the kind of insights that can come out of other models that could have been much better in a lot of ways. And the third thing that a lot of companies currently try to do is basically pick up an open source model and try to kind of customize that. They'll fine tune the parameters, they'll try to kind of use something that's already developed and use that towards generating insights that might help them make decisions. The challenges that you should be aware of here are customizing an AI model is basically taking up, let's say, someone who runs for leisure and putting him to compete in an Olympic race. Why? Because these models are very generalized and they have a sort of an understanding on how to go about giving you recommendations, but ultimately they're not fine tuned for your case. Even if you're putting in your data, they kind of make some inferences, but the level of accuracy that you can get with customized, tailor made solutions are very different from what you can get by customizing an existing open source or even a private model. So these three approaches exist, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong, but it's just about weighing the pros and cons of what works best for your organization. And there's another way, and that is something that we kind of do at Bitgrit. That is basically crowdsourcing custom AI solutions from a community of developers, right? And this is how we've been able to kind of come up with custom solutions for nearly all the companies that we've worked with, that you basically release your particular problem statement out there to a wider community. You don't have to hire a team. You don't have to stick with a particular hypothesis. You don't have to customize an existing model. You can have something tailor made for you by actually leveraging the power of the community. So, as I mentioned earlier, talent is a big concern. And right now, for any company, it's super important to understand how they can go about leveraging global talent pool and having and assessing who is best equipped to serve the business case that you wish to solve within your organization. And at Bitgrit, we've built one of the largest communities of AI developers in the world. We've got over 37,000 members on our platform spread across 62 different countries. And this community is not something that are, just online registrations. We built it from the ground up through hundreds of targeted events, through partnerships with leading universities, through partnerships with professional communities across different countries. So, if you want to kind of tap into this community and to leverage this community in order to build custom solutions, you can simply head over to the competition platform. So, it's very simple. You put out a problem statement, you expose your data sets, and these data sets remain private, but I'll talk about that in due course. And you announce a prize money. And this prize money can be anywhere from, $3,000 to $5,000 for a very simple use case where you want to have a much higher accuracy than the existing models out there, to 100,000 when it comes to very very specialized models that you need to be that need to be created that can potentially be a game changer in the industry. But we've kind of worked with nonprofits, we've worked with startups, and we understand that, for a lot of companies, budget restraints are a big thing. So we can have a sort of a conversation in terms of what is the best strategy in terms of exciting this community, of making sure that you get the best insights from this particular community. Now, how does this competition platform work? You basically put out the problem statement, expose your data sets, you announce a prize money, and then thousands of AI developers that are there within our community compete against each other to solve your business problem, right? They will submit their solutions, and these solutions are ranked for accuracy in real time. So you have a very good sense of what is the kind of average solution that's being put out there, whether that makes more sense, or there are different approaches that these people have taken. You get the benefit of choice. You get to choose out the best solution that works for the problem statement that you have, that works in a way that is optimal for you in terms of economics, in terms of scalability, in terms of the speed as well. This benefit of choice, I believe, is one of the biggest factors that can contribute towards the success of the model being deployed within your organization. And finally, at the end of the competition, the top models, that can be the top three, that can be the top five, that can be the top 10, depending on how much of a choice do you need, basically win a cash prize. And against this cash prize, you get full ownership of the model that is created. And this model is, the good part about that is it's automatically deployed on our infrastructure. So you get a simple API endpoint that you can plug in into your systems, and you can start using it very easily without actually going through the hassle of deploying the solution, of maintaining the solution, of having the data pipeline set up in place. And one of the things that we are the most proud of is our privacy preserving solution, right? So we have something which is known as Gridbox. It's a patented technology that basically creates a sandbox for AI models and data sets to securely connect on the cloud. Now, what it does is it allows AI developers to build solutions on your data set without actually accessing the contents of the data set itself, right? So I gave you the example of, let's say, Visa earlier. As an AI developer, I know what parameters are there in the data set, but I need not go about, giving that the transaction details. Everything is built on a cloud, the data is secure, and at the same time, you're able to kind of harness the insights that come out of it. And it is estimated that, what current models have built, touch less than 10% of the data that can be exploited in order to make better business decisions. And this is unlocking a huge opportunity for organizations that are sitting on large data silos, because it is potentially unlocking mechanisms for them to monetize their data sets without actually exposing sensitive data to anyone out there in the world. Uh, at the same time, we kind of realize that for a lot of companies, maybe having a custom made model is not a right fit when you're just in the sort of an experimentation phase, when you want to see what an AI adoption journey can look like within your organization. So for that, we have something which we call the Model Hub. So it's very similar to what the App Store did when it came to mobile applications. We have the Bitgrit Model Hub in the same way for AI models. These are pre-built off-the-shelf models that you can license, that you can connect your data sets with using the Gridbox technology and start using them right away through APIs, right? On the developer side, this is again very important, because that is how we make sure that the models are maintained. We make sure that they have ownership of the models that they create. So the IP resides with the developer in this case, and that kind of gives them incentive to make sure that the models stay up to date without losing any ownership of the work that they have done. So when we talk about community AI, there are a lot of advantages. It's a much faster time to market if you have a very clear problem statement in place, and if you have certain data points. You can basically have a model ready, a custom model ready within a matter of 2 to 3 months, rather than stretching it out to a year and a half, which is the typical life cycle these days. You have access to global AI developers. So ultimately, the same cash price might not, appeal to a lot of people, let's say in the US, but it opens up a lot of wider opportunities in other geographies. And that gives you access to talent that you can actually rank. So you know for a fact that these developers are not just saying that they'd be able to kind of make good models for you. You know for a fact which models work. And you are basically deploying the best of the best, the creme de la creme of the models that come up from these competitions. Finally, it's at the end of the day, you have to kind of understand what is the cost benefit analysis. And the good thing about having it crowdsourced from the community is these are cost efficient solutions. If you were to estimate the cost of having an AI team, you hire 2 to 3 AI developers that work on a particular problem statement for even, let's say, 3 months. You'd you're looking north of 100K for the development of a simple model. But the same thing, when you're able to kind of leverage the larger community, it becomes much, much more cost efficient while you're not compromising on quality even for a single bit. I'd actually argue these are much better solutions than what you can develop in-house. And finally, you have the choice, you have diversity, you have different approaches towards solving the same problem. Now, some of them might give you better accuracy, others might give you better speed, others might give you better costs in terms of running those models if they are to be used very, very frequently. So, this diversity in having different AI approaches work for you is very, very important. So I'd kind of take a moment to talk about a particular case study of Atre. So Atre is a big company in Japan, and they basically wanted to create a matching model for their networking app, Yenta. Now, the way that it worked was they already had an AI team in place, and actually that's a picture of their AI team. They had an accuracy of 68%. So they created their own model. And they kind of came to us because this accuracy was not making their model competitive enough or a big enough feature for them to be marketing it across and having that as one of their main USPs when when they're initiating Yenta out there in the market. So we had a discussion with them, and typically whenever we're talking about a pre-existing model or refining a pre-existing model, we'd give a benchmark accuracy that if our community is not able to improve your model by a significant percentage, we're not going to charge you a single cent, right? And the benchmark accuracy that we gave in this case was 80%. So they launched this competition and they did not have a big budget. So they had a prize money pool of just $10,000. But there were nearly 1,700 participants that submitted their solutions. Nearly 1,000 models were submitted from the 1,700 participants, and the best performing model had an accuracy of 87%. This is nearly an increase of 20%. And when you kind of talk about that big of a difference in terms of accuracy, that is a make or break case in a lot of cases for a lot of AI models. Uh, Currently, if you look at the market, let's say for a simple prediction model, an accuracy difference of 0.5% makes a model considerably better. So imagine having an accuracy boost of nearly 20%. Um, and I'd also kind of take a moment to talk about how some of the companies use competitions as a way of training and assessment. So we basically work a lot with Accenture, particularly in Japan. They have been using the Bitgrit platform in order to recruit talent. They get a lot of applications for these digital IT consultants that specialize in AI, but they do not have a sense of whether what they've studied at universities or what their previous experience is going to directly translate towards the industry problem statements that they seek to solve at Accenture. So what they did was they used our platform and they kind of, used some of the projects that they worked on in the past. They put it there as competitions and they used that as a benchmarking mechanism for people that are applying for their open roles. And that helps them in understanding who is able to deal better with the kind of problems that they seek to solve within Accenture for their clients that they're working with, and have the relevant skill set be a part of their team. This is something that was sort of game changing for them, because the AI division is one of the best performing ones when it comes to digital consulting agencies out there in Japan. Another particular use case of using the same platform, but instead of for assessment, this was used towards skill development, was at Nagaoka University. So Nagaoka University basically had professors rolling this out for the students, and this became part of the curriculum to train the students that they have to better develop their skills and make sure that they are ready for the industry by having skills, having tested their skills, having built their skills on real world problem statements. So we know that every organization is different and there are varying AI needs, but ultimately there are effective solutions that you can actually leverage no matter what stage you're at. If you are an AI innovator and if you feel like AI is gonna fundamentally change the direction of your business, you can crowdsource custom AI solutions through competitions. If you are an early adopter and if you feel like AI is going to be a major part of your organization, you're going to have a lot of projects going forward, you can use our job board, which I think I kind of missed talking about today. But because we have access to such a large community of AI developers, you can tap into this talent and you can basically put out the requirements that you have in order to get people interested in joining your organization. If you are a fast follower, if you feel like you need to get some sort of AI solutions, involved within your organization, but you're not ready to kind of take the jump quite yet, that's fine. You can basically, have ready-made solutions on the Bitgrit Model Hub, license them out, and start using them um, within your enterprise environment. And finally, if you feel like you fall in the category of an AI assessor, whether you want to use that for recruitment or to train the teams that you already have, or to assess, you know, the talent, the performance, the quality of the talent that's there within the company, you can go about white labeling the competition platform and having custom competitions that that are much more focused on understanding the skill points of different developers that participate in it. And when we talk about Bitgrit, we say that, some of the largest companies that you can think of in the world have trusted us. So if you are having any sort of a query in terms of how we can actually help you, we'd be happy to have a chat. So that is mostly it. We are, you know, currently operating in 3 geographies. As I mentioned, we started off in Japan, we expanded into the Middle East, so we are there in Abu Dhabi, and now we are basically setting up our base in San Francisco. Um, Happy to kind of have any questions that you guys have, and happy to discuss maybe, in any case of or any ideas you that you might have had for, implementing AI within your organizations. We can loop in our AI team to discuss that free of charge and have certain benchmark accuracy so that you know for a fact what works best for your organization. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you so much. I'd be open to any questions that you have now.
Thank you so much, Saksham. So we do have some questions for you. The first question is, how can data center developers help give more people access to our infrastructure?
So data center developers, we currently allow for different sort of infrastructure providers to kind of come in the ecosystem. This is something that we have in the pipeline. And ultimately, that is something that is very aligned with our vision of democratizing AI. So we do not want our data centers and our computing resources to be centralized with the big tech companies. We want to kind of democratize that to as many companies and providers as possible. So would be happy to kind of discuss collaborations on that front. If you have solutions that are ready to kind of have automated AI deployment hosted on them, we can actually explore possibilities of working together on that front too.
Great. How do you handle change requests to the problem statement? Do the development teams collaborate prior to submitting the results?
So this is actually a pretty good question. So the way that our competitions work is we split that out into three parts. There's a pre-competition phase where, our team is going to sit down with your team to identify the problem statement to make sure that you're getting the best sort of exposure, getting the best solution, getting the best return for the investment that you're putting in. And in that case, we dig into what your business problems are, what sort of data are you collecting, what sort of data you might have access to, what are the public data sets that we can tap into, and kind of correlate all of that into, a seamless strategy. So before you start your competition, there would be so much clarity with you in terms of understanding how you can go about actually having AI implemented within your company itself. This this exercise in itself is sort of the most fundamental transformation experience for companies, because a lot of times they'd have some idea in their mind, but they kind of fail to recognize the broader possibilities of the insights that they can get from these AI solutions. So that is the first phase of a particular competition that we brainstorm with you, right? Typically, in a lot of cases, we can provide you with a benchmark accuracy in terms of what you can expect, so that you can have certain business plans rolled out according to the same, and we can have commitments towards meeting that accuracy too. Once you launch the competition, we basically have solutions kind of coming in, and these solutions are deployed. So there are two ways that you can go about it. You can have the people that are uh, you know delivering the top performing solutions. You can basically have a continuous service engaged with them for them to maintain the model and to make sure that it is operating according to the changing requirements that you have, or the change in the data that you've been collecting. All of that is accommodated, and at the same time, the infrastructure that we have at Bitgrit makes sure that your data pipeline is already integrated, right? So you don't have to worry about deploying that solution and maintaining that solution. It is very easy for you to just make sure that this is something that's continuously moving forward. So just to kind of summarize, I think this was sort of a long answer. Problem statement in itself, I'd say, is something that we typically tend to work with you and nail down before the competition. But when it comes to, change requests with regards to the data that's kind of coming through, with regards to the variances that you expect, or with regards to additional data points that you might be collecting, that is something that can be handled on our automated infrastructure.
So I had a question also about differentiation with other technologies that are out there. Obviously, Bitgrit has had substantial clients already, but how do you differentiate from other technologies that are out there?
So basically, I think it's about leveraging the power of the community, right? As I mentioned earlier, you can have an AI team, you can have people kind of building solutions, working on one particular hypothesis, but having that choice, having that diversity of solutions is what makes a big difference. We had one particular case which was of a leading payments provider. They wanted to kind of have a model that predicts what is going to be the cheapest and the fastest way to remit funds across borders. Now, for this particular problem statement, the accuracy that was the highest was not the model that was deployed, but actually the model that kind of came in third on the leaderboard was the one that they went forward with. Why? Because it was a super efficient model. It could handle like tens of thousands of requests within a second. And it was optimal for them because the costs of running that were actually quite low. So sometimes you need not go with the highest accuracy. Sometimes you have to kind of factor in other things that actually suit your organization, that suit the business case that you're kind of looking at. And one of the core things that I feel differentiates us is the grid box technology that I mentioned, right? Having a sort of a sandbox for models and data sets to connect is currently not there. So for you to protect your data that is private, the only approach that is currently in place that is used by many of the companies today is using synthetic data. And synthetic data has a lot of inherent challenges. It might mimic some of the properties of the data set that you have, but at the end of the day, it's not real data. And you cannot expect very high accuracies when you're actually working with synthetic data. So this ecosystem where the data pipeline is sort of maintained and constantly connected to our infrastructure, and at the same time the models are continuously updated by the developer who built them in the first place, is in my honest opinion the biggest differentiator that we have out there.
And maybe a second question that's related, but how does the pricing work in general? Like you mentioned that smaller companies to larger companies and the price money, how does that work?
Right. So pricing is something that's a bit subjective because every single organization has different needs, and every single need that you might have is having a different complexity, right? So if there's a data set of, let's say, a super complicated data set of that requires very specialized, you know, understanding, that requires subject knowledge experience, for you to get a good solution from that particular data set, you need to have a bigger budget assigned, because very few people can basically make a lot of sense out of it and work towards development of that solution. So this is something that we kind of discuss, but in a lot of cases, we are able to kind of, uh, you know, sit down, have a discussion in terms of what the budgetary requirements are and how we can optimize that. For startups, we've even gone to competitions with a prize money pool of as low as like $5,000 to $10,000. For nonprofits, we actually sometimes kind of, co-fund the project ourselves. Um, and for larger organizations that have very specific, aggressive problem statements in terms of the requirements that they and the insights that they seek to kind of get out of it, the prize money pool in itself can go as high as 100 to $150,000. So it's very subjective, but I'd recommend having that initial discussion, because if not anything, it's just going to open you to the sort of possibilities that you can exploit from the data that you've been collecting. And apart from the prize money, there are two ways of actually using the competition platform in itself. So either there's going to be a platform utilization fee, and even that kind of varies depending on what sort of evaluators you want to use to evaluate the models that are being submitted on a platform. What sort of like how complicated is it on the cloud computing side, and just to kind of make sure that is it a private data set that you want to preserve, or is it something that you're willing to kind of openly put out to the community, because that again factors into the cost. So it's a bit subjective, but of course we can help you understand your AI needs, help you better understand how to kind of go about the entire process, and give you a very, very detailed estimate in terms of what you can expect before anything initiates.
So your team actually helps to clients to understand what would be a proper price for a prize or to submit.
Definitely. So, if you put out a very complicated problem statement and announce a price of 2,000, of course you can do it on our platform, but you would not see the results that the community can bring in, right? You have to make sure that there is an appropriate mapping of the rewards versus, what AI developers stand to gain from it and what you stand to gain from it. And that is kind of mapped in accordance to the complexity and in accordance to the importance of that problem statement within your organization. So our team, our AI development team that we have in-house, that basically kind of sits down with you to better understand your problem statement and the data that you're collecting. This pre-competition phase that we have, which is more of a sort of a consultancy, is something that we kind of do with companies, and we're not kind of making money, we're not charging anything for that, for you to have better clarity in terms of what you can actually do. Once you have that clarity, and once you have insight into how that can fundamentally change your business, that is when we basically ask you how important is it and kind of come up with an appropriate prize money. Now, just to kind of go a bit more in detail, so a lot of these NASA projects that we did, we had a restriction that we can only have participants from the US, right? These need to be US citizens, permanent residents, because federal funds are kind of going towards, uh, you know, people that are developing these solutions. So in that case, and most of the problem statements that they had were very, very complicated because these are national level concerns that they want to address with AI. In these cases, they had big, big prize money, but at the same time, the kind of people that were contributing were the research teams at Stanford. A professor having his, PhD team from University of Florida that actually won one of the challenges.
Hmm.
And you had professionals that actually kind of came in that had jobs at Meta, Google, some of the biggest tech companies that you can think of, and this was a way for them to kind of take on passion projects, take on projects that they felt like would be interesting to solve, and maybe if they kind of get in amongst the top rankers, they'd be winning a cash prize that is pretty substantial. So having that interest aligned is very important, and I guess that is what makes for a great competition, having a sense of what is going to drive and motivate the community to give you the best of their efforts.
Yeah, it's so interesting. There's actually a question of how many programmers usually take part in the competition, and I think it might be interesting to add to that based on what you just said is how many programmers, and then for people leveraging BitGrit, are programmers more interested in the cash prize? Or are they more interested in the challenge to solve it, the problem?
That's a very interesting question. And honestly, like we generally have like a sort of a short interview with the winners and kind of understand what their motivations were to, participate in the competition, how they went about the entire process and whatnot. A lot of times the best solutions come from people that are actually very interested in exploring it. And as I mentioned, a lot of times these AI developers, they are not able to get access to uh, these problem statements where they can actually make a significant impact. The prize money is definitely a motivation. That is something, that they can kind of walk away. That can be a secondary income stream for them. But more importantly, it's like the bragging rights. I made a model that is, used by this particular company, and I'm having like 10,000 hits on my model per day. Can you see the kind of impact that I made? And
Yeah.
that's a very interesting aspect. The second thing, when you talked about the number of participants in any given project, again, it varies. If you have a lot of restrictions in terms of the eligibility for anyone to participate, let's say US citizens and permanent residents only, the numbers are gonna drop. But if it's an open global competition, which is not very, very specialized in a particular field, we have seen as many as 5,000 participants for a given competition. And in this case, the prize money was not huge. It was just $20,000. Um, in some other cases wherein it was very, very specific to medical research, let's say, even then we had close to 500 to 600 participants coming in. And this was with the restriction of them being from the US. So I'd say at the very least, even with the most stringent of the eligibility that you kind of put in, you'd have at least 500 people kind of coming in and working on your solution. And it can go as high as 5,000. Of course, not all 35,000, 37,000 members in a community are going to participate in every single competition. It can be out of their skill set, it can be out of their interest, it can be just because of a factor that they might not have time to kind of work on it then. But I'd say the range varies from 5,000 to 500 to 5,000, with an average being close to 1,500 to 2,000 for any given competition on our platform.
So we have time. We're gonna just a few minutes left for this session, but After the competition, then who owns the rights to the development? How does that work? Um,
So typically competitions, because they're very, very customized solutions, the IP is transferred over to the company that is hosting the competition. So all of the cash prize or the prize money that you're kind of putting out there is basically legally a payment for you to kind of take over the IP of the model. But how we kind of support and incentivize developers to kind of, continue maintaining it is through something which kind of goes on to the post competition phase, which kind of comes in on the support side. So these are people that know your problem well enough, that know the kind of data that you've been collecting well enough, and they're the best people to kind of maintain that model going forward. So you can basically have them on sort of a retainer through Bitgrit, and then get people to continuously maintain and make sure that there's not a lot of variance in terms of the accuracy. There's just improvement and no harm towards the accuracy of the model, even as there are fluctuations in sort of the seasonality of data that you're collecting, or changes in trends in terms of how your business is working, big changes in terms of global events that have happened that might have had an impact on your business. The model is abreast of that and is able to adapt the predictions according to the same. So that's the typical model, but we can be a bit more flexible in terms of understanding if you have variant sort of different needs from the usual, and we can try our best to accommodate those too.
Got it. So I'm going to ask one more question, and it's a bit more technical, but seems like it's an important question to clarify. So, the question is just to clarify: is the Gritbox essentially its own protected AI training environment? If not, how can programmers build custom programs that train on my data without having access to the data?
So the grid box actually, it's a bit technical, so I'll probably give you a bit more technical answer too. So it's something that kind of leverages a trusted execution environment, and we are able to kind of make sure that an AI developer, when he works on the data set, he gets a synopsis of the kind of data that he's working on, right? So you'd have access to the kind of parameters that you're collecting, the kind of what are the mean values that you can see, what is the range of the data points that are there in a particular parameter. Are there any outliers? What is the probability of having that outlier? So there's actually a sort of a small AI that kind of creates that synopsis in itself, analyzing the data. But using this synopsis, you can ultimately understand what you're working with. And now it's a cloud environment, so it's as easy for you to kind of just connect to a data set. It's automatically linked in the cloud, and now AI developers can go about creating their own solutions from the same. So that just allows you to make sure that the IP of the model that is created is also sort of in a protected cloud environment, and at the same time the data is not getting out of there. So it's all happening on a secure side, and that's how it works. There's not, like, apart from the data synopsis, there's not an AI running the grid box itself. It's more on the AI ops side, and in terms of how AI is actually deployed on enterprise grade cloud systems. But that again makes it very easy for you as an enterprise to just have API endpoints, and these API endpoints can be connected to your environment so that it's not difficult for you to manage uh, an AI solution after it's been built. I hope that kind of answers the
Yeah.
question.
Well, it obviously it's a bit technical, and I encourage everybody to follow up with Saksham, connect with him, and he will be able to answer all of your questions. We are at time, but I wanted to thank everybody for coming today, and thank you, Saksham, for really fascinating. It's just so fun to be on the cutting edge of technology with folks like yourself, and excellent presentation. And we look
Thank you so
forward to
much.
seeing the growth and the impact that Gripbit's going to have on the world. Yeah, amazing.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and thank you everyone for joining us today. It was great to kind of speak to you all.